Uday, we're talking about 10,000 startups. You were 26 years old. It was 1985, and you created this company with a very focused mission at the point. And in the year 2014, as we just start, you've got a 50,000 crore company that you've built, right? So I think we should first give Uday a huge round of applause. And I think it's fair to say, Uday, ideally we'll create many more than 10,000 startups in India, over the tech startups, over the next decade. But if we can create 100 companies, or even 50 companies like the one that you've created, we've more than achieved our mission. So let's start off, Uday, with the early days of your journey. In 85, you created this company around bill discounting, and every few years you've changed the business, you've added, you've expanded. But tell us a little bit about, you were 26 years old and you started a company in India, right? What was the vision? What made you start this company? What was your original vision and goal?
Thank you, Rajan, and I'm really delighted to be with all of you here. And let me first start by saying that I've always loved being a startup, which is what I was, and I wish I can keep the spirit of a startup even now at this stage, because there is such a great need for every firm to be on the edge in today's world. And I must also admit to something else, that if I had started my company today, I had no future, because I was able to grow in my early days because of a huge gap in the information society which existed then. And therefore, I would have to think more creatively how I would survive in today. And therefore, friends, I just wanted to share with you the starting point for me in terms of what went in my mind was, hey, here it is, I did my MBA from Bajaj and was almost joining Hindustan Lever, a consumer products company, when thanks to a nudge from my father, I started this company. And I had a friend from my Jamnalal Bajaj MBA class, and that highlights the importance of network. And this friend of mine joined a Tata company called Nelco. In those days, it was quite strange that banks used to lend money to companies at 17%, which is significantly higher than what they paid on their deposits. And banks would pay individual depositors 6%. That means borrow money from depositors at 6 and lend at 17. And for me, after passing out of MBA and learning all discounted cash flow and all these much higher level hierarchy things, this sounded very strange. I mean, how could you take money at 6 and lend to Tatas at 17? I mean, what is the reason for the 11% spread? But in that was the opportunity, and it was the early seeds of what you call as a banking business in a way. So I went to a lot of my family friends who used to keep money in bank deposits at 6% and say, listen, instead of 6, what if you got 12% on a Tata company risk? You're not taking risk on me, but on a Tata company risk. I'll give you 12. So they would look at me strangely and say, does this guy know what he's talking? But maybe we'll put in 1 lakh or 2 lakhs into bill discounting. So I got money at 12. And I went to Nelco and said, okay, 17 is what you're getting from your banks, but if there was a scarcity, banks did not give unlimited money, I will do it at 16. So a spread which was 11% between 6 and 17, I narrowed it to 4%. And that's how business happened to me. I worry about it if in today's world, if there was a 400 basis point spread, social media or whatever other technology would wipe it out in minutes. But that's how it remained, and that's how we grew in the early days. And it is quite amazing that the Indian banking system is what it is. And even today, there are lots of areas where banking is still very much behind the curve. And I see that as a huge, huge opportunity, and also for a number of entrepreneurs to leverage off the banking industry and its inefficiencies for building business models.
That's great. So we'll come to the white space opportunities, Uday. So I think it's very interesting, right? What you said was there was this glaring opportunity around arbitrage.
Yeah.
And I think with startups, one of the things we talk a lot about is, are you going after a real unmet or, opportunity, right? Because a lot of, we do see a lot of companies that are trying to build a feature.
Yeah.
It's a small thing, but you were going after this massive thing, given where India was to do that. So that's great. So now let's go to the first few years. I think I think many of the attendees are building companies. They're in their early stages of building companies. And I think entrepreneurs, as you know, struggle with getting through the first 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Because if you can get through those first few years, then it becomes easier. I mean, some could argue it gets harder, but tell us, what were the 3 or 4 most important things in the first, let's say, 3 or 4 years of your journey as an entrepreneur?
Yeah. I think the thing which you really got to focus is whatever is the need for business, you should be able to spend money for that. And whatever is outside, just don't waste money. And therefore, I could not afford a fancy office. So, in Flora Fountain, my family gave me 300 square feet of office space, which was compound tiles and old furniture. I remember Godrej tables we had, we cut the tables into smaller size so that we had more space and more people to accommodate. Therefore, anything which is a wasteful overhead and which is not adding to your business or your top line, don't waste money. But anything which is critical for your business, don't save money. And therefore, I used to do business in Chennai with a leasing company, and which meant I needed to travel to Chennai. The cost of air travel plus hotel stay at Hotel Connemara in those days was a lot of money. I could not afford to stay in a lower level hotel because the guy I was meeting, he should feel that this guy is okay. So I had to stay in a hotel like Hotel Connemara. But it was pressure for me on overhead. But you did it because that was needed for your business. Therefore, don't cringe on anything which helps you build your business. Everything else is a waste of money. And just be very tight and ruthless about it. And don't be ashamed about what people will say. Arey, aap godown jaisi jagah se kaam kar rahe ho. Doesn't matter, as long as you have a business model.
Terrific. So what about the, and I think that's very helpful because in the early days of a startup, funding is very scarce. I think some startups don't spend on what they need to spend. And I think your example is terrific. What about building the team, Uday? You were 26 years old. How did you build a team in the early days? I mean, who did you hire? How did you get them to join you?
Yeah, one of the first people I got to join me was a person who was in the finance department at Nelco. The guy was very smart in terms of squeezing me on rates and everything else, and I just found him to be an outstanding negotiator. So I started with myself and 2 people, who were junior people. But when I found this guy to be so good, I wooed him, I went after him, and he was also a bit of a startup kind of guy, a guy called Shivaji Dam, a chartered accountant, and he joined me from Nelco. So that was my first break. And thereafter I found that you had to make sure that you were getting people with high integrity, but smart on the other side of the counterparty fence. And if you spotted one, go after that person. And that's how I built the team.
Right. So, and how did you get people to, one of the things I think even entrepreneurs even today struggle with is how do you get that absolute best talent to take the risk and join their startup, right? And how did you think about it in those days?
I think it is a little bit of passion, it's a little bit of purpose, it's a little bit of something different, something challenging. And a lot of it is personal charisma in the early stages. I mean, you have to be able to convince the other side with your passion and purpose that, hey, we will create something.
Right.
And that it has to be believable. And that's absolutely important.
Startups, in the entrepreneurial land these days, we have this word called pivot. Mm-hmm. You got to change the business, you got to adjust to the market landscape, etc. If you look at the company you've built, Kotak, you've pretty much not just survived but thrived through every crisis. Whether it's the 91 crisis, the Harshad Mehta scam, the Asian crisis, the dot-com bust, the recent global meltdown. I think your firm not only just went through those but became stronger at each phase. It'll be helpful for you to share some lessons of, how are you able to do that? I mean, most of your contemporaries may have disappeared, logos keep going away through each of these scams, but you all got stronger, you added more businesses. Tell us a little bit about that.
I think every crisis in a sector is a huge opportunity. And we have found post every single crisis, we have benefited. And the reasons for them are 2. Number 1, is your ability to spot a problem before others do. And number 2 is to make sure that in general you make less mistakes than everybody else. And 1991-92 was a Harshad Mehta security scam. It was waiting to happen. And I have seen huge deaths of my competition. And we lived through what I call as the Agni Pariksha. And there are few home truths which we have now internalized in the firm. One of them is, when something is too good to be true, it is too good to be true. So don't try and challenge it. And very often people get sucked in by some lure of something which is too good to be true. So there will always be a catch there. Watch out for that. Number two, you need to be able to think a little beyond and be able to say that, for example, in 97-98, when you saw the Asian crisis, a lot of NBFCs in the sector which I was died. There were some 4,000 odd NBFCs and 3,980 died. Wow. And the mortality rate was huge. It took away a lot of competition. We said that unlike the big banks in those days, the state-owned banks and some of the private sector banks, we will not get any bailout from anybody to give capital to us. Therefore, we got to survive on our own. We actually pruned our lending book by 50%. Okay? Our stock collapsed, but we knew we were on the right track. And that saved us. So in that period, 97, 98 to 2003 is when the whole industry got wiped out. We actually came out of it much stronger. But markets too did not see it till 2 or 3 years later. Right. And the other interesting aspect is, be very clear what you know and what you don't. So in the mid-90s, we felt that in the financial sector, we did not know what the hell was happening enough. We were a little bit like frogs in the well. So we did joint venture tie-ups with two global majors, Goldman Sachs and Ford Credit. One is in investment banking and securities, others in car finance. And we learned from them. We imbibed the best practices. So more than the financial capital, knowledge capital which came from them was something which was very vital. And 10 years later, we bought back our stake, whatever we had given them in both those joint ventures. And in a very happy manner. So we have great relationships with all our partners, but we think knowledge and knowing how best global practices are is critical for scaling up.
Terrific. So I think those are very good lessons. I think making sure you're always trying to look at the future, understand the risks, making sure you surround yourself with partners, team members who bring new capabilities and so on and so forth, right? And also one of the interesting things that you mentioned, Uday, which is you took a hard call and you cut your portfolio in half.
Yes.
Right? And the stock market reacted. So being able to make those calls at the right time without worrying about, because otherwise you would have gone under, right?
Yeah, and without worrying about quarter to quarter.
Quarter to quarter, yeah. Let's now move to adoption of technology in the banking, in your firm, but also in the banking sector. In many ways, what's happened in India, Uday, is, we've gone from having no internet users to now having 200 million internet users, 70 million of them access the internet through smartphones and so on and so forth. The banking sector has rolled out ATM technology very well, and I think a few banks like yours have beginning to adopt, good, have good websites, now have good mobile strategies, etc. Talk to us a little bit about, given where you are, where do you think the internet, mobile internet, and technology more broadly, whether it's, Aadhaar and other platforms, what can it really do to the banking industry over the next 5-10 years?
Frankly, Rajan, I think banking industry is light years behind what's happening in the broader technology.
I try to say that in a nice way. Actually.
Yeah. And we had Rajan come and spend half a day with us, I think a few months ago. And it is just shocking how much behind the curve banks are. But in that lies the opportunity for every one of you, that because we are behind the curve, we will be forced to adopt good new things which can be fitted in like a plug into what we are doing. And there's a huge, huge opportunity for efficiency in banking. The problem which, and I think some of it is genuine and some of it is in our minds, is the perception about risk and trust. And I think central banks also are slow for that same reason. How risky is it and how trustworthy is the basis of the new technology from the point of view of robustness? And we spend an enormous amount of time trying to save ourselves from numerous frauds which are hitting our industry coming out of this whole technology. Therefore, one big area which I think banking industry would love to grab is around security. Therefore, if we can get a lot of technology and applications around security
to make you more secure,
which we are very, 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 very nervous about that. I mean, what is it that keeps me awake every night? Will I have a bank next morning? Will the bank be cleaned out? That is one. On the other hand, so that is the security aspect. On the other hand, so what keeps me awake is, why do you need this so-called animal called a bank? Tomorrow, a Google or a Vodafone or an AT&T can do everything we do. Will we have a business 5 or 10 years from now? So it is these two extreme sort of things which are actually the whole canvas of opportunity from the point of view of where banking is, where it can be, but what are the risks.
If you were 25 again, today, 2014, India, obviously economy 1.8 trillion, second largest internet market in the world, what would you, and you said you're going to do a startup.
Yeah.
What would you do? What are the 3 kind of companies you'd build?
I think that's a real tough one, but I would probably use technology for sure. I think most likely it will be around mobile, because I think that's extremely powerful. And I would find a massive national distribution disintermediation business, which is...
So say more about that, because I don't know what that means.
I think if you really look at it, the gap in terms of the whole distribution system between urban and rural India is huge. And if I can find a way of efficiently being able to handle ticket sizes which are smaller, it is something like what Hindustan Lever did with sachets. So how do I build a distribution model which is low cost? So the cost to serve is pretty low, like what telecom companies have done in terms of mobile rates.
You mean for financial services?
For financial services.
Right.
And find a technology-driven solution to low-cost national distribution. And use that for disintermediating the banks. Because frankly, the banking system has a significant counter opportunity from startups to disintermediate it.
And to do that, would you need a banking license or you wouldn't?
In my view, you could do through an NBFC platform.
Right.
The question really is, of course, it's about regulation, it's about broadband, it's about how effective internet is. But if somebody got that, it can dramatically shrink intermediation costs.
That's interesting. And you haven't seen anybody doing that yet in India?
I think part of the problem is also the whole broadband and the net and the how good that service is and how sort of robust that is. So if you get high-class broadband across the country, I think you'll see that.
Talk a little bit about some of the mistakes you've made in the early days, not today, but if you were to do it again, building a company, building teams, what are some of the things you learned that might be helpful for the audience here?
I think I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. Frankly, I asked myself the question, especially after we became a bank in 2003, should we have scaled up faster? And should we have taken big bets on scaling up faster than we have? And in retrospect, if I had the opportunity, I would have scaled up between 2003 and 2008 even faster than...
Even faster?
Even faster than we had. And maybe I had the opportunity of being 2 or 3x where we are. And it's at that time, you're beginning to worry, if I spend so much and invest so much, it's going to hurt my P&L. I'm not sure about the outcomes. But the opportunity was extremely large, and therefore, little bolder than would have certainly helped. And therefore, for this New Year's, my message to my employees was, we're going to build a bigger, better, bolder Kotak. So
there you go. Terrific, terrific. That's great. One of the things we talked about outside Uday was, despite being, $1.8 trillion economy where the ecosystem has developed, you have a couple of hundred angel investors, a lot of VCs, the reality is raising 50 lakhs is still very, very difficult, right? I'm sure there are entrepreneurs in the room where, run around for 6 months, talk to all kinds of, investors to raise 50 lakhs. You come at it from a financial services standpoint, right? What advice do you have for the ecosystem? And this is more really for the ecosystem on how we can solve, because it's a shame to have so many great ideas, founders, and raising 50 lakhs really hard.
Rajan, I told you about it. Two Rajans together can make a big difference. One is you and second is Governor Rajan. And maybe you should go and talk to the other Rajan about how, we as a bank, all banks have requirements of 40% priority sector. Is it possible to consider angel funding or venture funding as a part of a priority sector, as a part of the inclusion exercise, where banks put in an X amount of money into some sort of a fund, right, and see how there could be a pretty dramatic growth for putting capital for startups. The question in my mind is, do we have the investors? I mean, the investment capability, right, and those smart investment managers like you have in the Valley in the US, who can really understand how to take the bets on startups. And if we have some really good managers who can do this, I think money can come.
Have you had mentors as you built the company, Uday? And if you're comfortable saying who they are, that's great. But if otherwise, would love to talk, just give us some thoughts around the importance of mentors, having a network, and so on.
I think network is critical, and being able to listen to people is extremely important. But for me, a lot of my early stage experience came from a professor at Jamnalal Bajaj, and I have no hesitation in publicly saying it. He was a professor called Professor Mankekar. He was our corporate finance professor, and the first day at class he said, what is the most important thing for a company? So people answered that most of it is around profits, okay? And he said, no. And the answer is something which each of you will relate to. He said, cash flow. Do you have enough money in your bank or in your company to be able to do what you need to do? And around that, of course, what I was very fascinated by him, and from Bajaj, Professor Mankekar used to be a pretty significant investor in stock markets, and this is in 1981. I would literally hold his little finger and go with him to the stock exchange and look at how the whole theory of finance was being implemented by him in investing.
Right.
So that was early stage, great learning for me. And even today, he's one of the most outstanding public market investors personally. So my view is, rather than have one role model, you learn from different people, get the best, and try and create your own chemical mix out of that.
Let's give Uday a big round of applause, everyone. Thank you, Uday, for that.